Hey everybody, welcome back to the vegetable garden. It is good to be back in this space. Although, you know, I have a ton of things I need to be doing in the garden right now. Like just cleaning out this whole area, cleaning out the rest of the garden. Every once in a while there's a really fun project that I can't wait to dig into. So that's what I'm gonna do today. So as you know, if you've been following this vegetable garden story, which has been going on for a long time now, and I will share some links in the description to a lot of the blog posts that I've written about it. This space, I always wanted this space to be a highly productive space, but also a very beautiful space to be. So we're always balancing aesthetics and production. And so as part of that, I always wanted to use the areas of the fence as more than just a fence. So that led me to Espalier trees. Now, you guys are probably familiar with Espalier, and I actually have two in here right now. Now, Espalier is just a French word that means flat, and it's a two-dimensional tree is what it is. Now, I do have 3 Espalier trees on the property. I have an Asian pear that's up against the chimney. And then in the vegetable garden here last year, I planted a Bartlett pear, which works as a pollinator for the Asian pear, and a Lincoln apple. Now, I have wanted for a long time to do something against the back wall behind me here. So this is south face, this wall is south facing. So lots of sun, great opportunity to do something back there. And now I'm gonna show you what I'm gonna do. Okay, so you can see that on either side of the back door here, I've got these skinny little beds. And I am going to plant what they call a Belgian fence back here. So a Belgian fence is a type of Espalier tree. And here, I made a diagram because it's a lot easier to show you in a picture than it is to show you standing here. Okay, so a Belgian fence is where you create squares that go up in angles. So each one of these is a tree, and then you create branches that go off at 45-degree angles, and they all cross and you create this lattice pattern. On the ends, you still have a tree, it's just that they're like a one-sided tree, so they only have the 45 degrees coming off the one side. So since there's a door in the middle, I'm obviously going to have to leave that open, and we'll have 2 sections of Belgian fence on either side. Now, ideally, I would have 7 trees on each side. I would have 1 at each post and then 2 trees in between each, because I think that spacing would be best. However, these trees came in bundles of 10, and there was no option to get them in smaller bundles. So I either had to buy 10 or I had to buy 20. And I either needed 10 trees or I would have needed 14 trees, meaning I would have had 6 trees left over. And I didn't want to spend that kind of money. So you can use a lot of different kinds of trees for Espalier, but the kind of trees that you most often see for that are fruit trees. And that makes a lot of sense. It's an easy way to produce a lot of fruit in a very small area. But I don't really want more fruit trees. I have several fruit trees, and I don't want to deal with any sort of disease problems or having to spray things. And really what I'm looking for here is something pretty. But it'd be great to have a pollinator for that apple tree. So I am going to do this whole fence in crab apples. It's going to be Royal Raindrops crab apple, which will have several seasons of interest because it actually has a purple leaf on it and a pink flower. So obviously it should be pretty when it's flowering. And apparently it does get some fall color as well. And then of course in winter, once you get that structure growing, you will have the bones there, and that will still be pretty as well. So this is going to be crab apple Belgian fence back here. So I should just tell you quickly that this project has been in my mind for a long time, but I didn't intend to do it this way. So all of the other Espalier trees that I have in the yard, I bought those pre-trained. It takes quite a long time to grow them out. As you know, I'm sort of one for instant gratification when possible. So I purchased all those that way. But Belgian fences are extremely hard to find. Even Espaliers are not easy to find at most nurseries. I had to order the apple, special order that one in. So it's not easy to find them because they're not super popular yet, although I think that's changing a little bit. But Belgian fences are, in particular, a lot of people haven't heard of those, and it's a very specific application. So I had actually tried for 2 years to order Belgian fences through mail order and through local nurseries, and none of it ever worked, and it was extraordinarily expensive. So I finally decided I'm just going to have to do my own. So I will tell you, this is a little nerve-wracking. But I've done a lot of research, I've done a lot of reading, and we're just gonna go for it. And it will be a while before it looks like the picture. It's gonna take a bit of time, but you know what? No time like the present, right? So here we go. So I just want to tell you what I've already done here. So if you guys have seen some other videos, I'm a big proponent of planting trees in their native soil. I think it's really important. You don't want to create that what do they call that, a $50 hole for a $5 plant or something like that, because you really want plants to just grow into the soil that's going to be native there. However, I'm changing things up a little bit here. There's really nothing natural about this process that I'm about to do here. This is all sort of contrived. And I happen to have in this area extraordinarily sandy soil. If I dig down a foot, I get nothing but sand. So I have gone through and amended the soil that's back here. So it's still plenty sandy. There's going to be a ton of drainage in it. But I have added some soil conditioner to it. I added whatever I could get out of some compost. And I've also added another ingredient. Let me grab it. Okay, so I've also added something called biochar blend. This is by Organic Mechanics. Now, biochar is a really interesting soil additive, and I don't pretend to understand it fully, but I am going to put a link to a fabulous podcast that Joe Lampel did on the Joe Gardener podcast maybe 2 years ago. That's really interesting, and there's still a lot of research going on with biochar, but this is a blend that has kelp in it. What else is there in it? Kelp, bone meal, alfalfa meal, and there are all sorts of interesting benefits to this. I would say just do a little research on it. I did spread some of this in here. There's also one other thing that's interesting about biochar, which is that, as you know, if you've probably heard of, there are some areas of the country that are dealing with these Asian jumping worms, which are, this is a whole video onto itself, so I'm not going to get into the weeds on this, but they're extremely problematic for your garden. So one of the things that some of the people who are investigating the whole jumping worm thing is looking at is how biochar might help that situation. So I do have jumping worms in areas of my garden. I probably have them in all of my garden, but I do have them certainly in some areas. So it is a problem that I'm dealing with. And adding this biochar, there is not concrete evidence about it helping at this point, but it sure as heck doesn't hurt. But this is a really interesting soil amendment that I'm just starting to use. I used it in a few of my vegetable gardens in the past. I believe it's really something interesting, but do your own research on it and see what you think. Okay, so I have the trees. They have been soaking. I picked them up from cold storage yesterday, and they've been soaking for probably 3 hours now, just so that those roots are really well hydrated. They are all bare root. They're grafted. Most crab apples and most fruit trees are grafted, and they are what are called whips. These are 4-foot whips, which means these are non-branching. Actually, you can see they're starting to, a couple of them are starting to get tiny little branches on them, but these are non-branching. So this is exactly what we want for this project. So it's pretty easy to see where the graft is on this. You can see this kind of knob right here. So on grafted fruit trees, you want to plant that above the ground, not below the ground like you might with rose. So I will make sure to leave a couple inches underneath it, and you can kind of see where the root flare starts, and that's where you're going to want the top of the soil to be. Okay, so it's the next day. Let me tell you what's happened. So I got all those trees planted yesterday. I got them staked low. I got them watered in. I've got everything mulched. But we're not done, because here's the next thing. In order to make that 45-degree angle V happen, I have to cut those trees down hard. So I sort of lost my nerve last night. This is maybe the scariest thing I've ever done in my own garden. And I realize that sounds a little dramatic, because after all, we're talking about gardening here. But it's a big commitment to go whacking things off like that. So last night I went through and I looked at all the articles that I've already looked at. I reviewed books. I talked to a good gardening friend extensively. And then I got up this morning and looked again. And then I actually contacted a local nursery that does a lot of commercial tree growing. And they reached out to their tree manager, and they got back to me right away to confirm that I am doing this right, because I just don't want to screw this up. And I especially don't want to screw it up when I'm doing it on YouTube, to be perfectly honest. So I'm going to need a little courage here, and that's what this gin is for. And then we're going to go over there, and this is not a time-consuming thing. It's just a little bit of measuring, a little bit of cutting, and then this project is done for now. So I guess there's nothing to do but have a little bit more of this and go over there. So as you can tell, there's not a lot to look at here. It's just sort of a bunch of sticks up against a fence, tied in to little bamboo stakes just to keep them upright. But here's where we have to cut. So I think you can see these little nubs. These are buds, and the idea is, and they're offsetting. So if you look, there's one here, and then there's one here. So they're about an inch apart. So if I cut above a pair of those, one will go off this way and one will go off the other way. Okay, so suffice to say, we only get one shot at this. And what I have to do first is determine how high from ground level do I want these to be. Okay, so I've gone through and I've decided that 14 inches works pretty well. I'm looking for buds that are facing generally the right direction. Sometimes, like this one is facing straight out this way. So if I cut it here, that branch would stick out this way and I'd have to sort of bend it around that way. So, okay, here we go. Okay, so that job was terrible. That was completely outside of my comfort zone. And one of these days I'm going to come back and I'm going to do a video in which I say, step outside your comfort zone. But let's see how this one turns out first. So there's nothing left to do here at this point other than to make sure that those get plenty of water and you take care of them like you would any other newly planted tree. I will go back soon and put in a bamboo framework that I'll be able to use to guide the branches along, because they'll want to go straight up, so you'll have to sort of pull them to a 45-degree angle and train them in the right direction. But that's all there is to do. So I guess we'll just see how this goes. Stay tuned to my Instagram. I often update on how projects are doing on my Instagram, and there's a link for that down below. And then if you like this video and you want to see the update to this, subscribe and make sure you hit notifications so you'll know when that is. I have no idea how long this is going to take, but I will keep you guys updated whether this works or whether this doesn't work. But like the book says, it should work, right? So we're just going to go with that. So anyway, I hope you guys are doing something fun in your garden today, or exciting, or maybe you're just sitting back and having a cocktail in your garden today, which is okay too. And we will catch you soon. Thanks.